CS news never stops, and Crossfire is back. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Crossfire. It has been quite some time since our last episode. I'm going to call this Season 2, but we are here again with my co-host, Brainstorm. How you doing today, mate?
Yeah, look, good. I'm glad we're back. It's good to be back. There's been a lot of Counter-Strike happening, a lot of content to be made that hasn't been made that we've missed. But we're back, we're doing it, and we're going to keep this as a weekly thing, or so we hope.
Yeah, well, the idea here is to sort of launch this Season 2 and, you know, go between maybe 10 to 12 episodes for the remainder of 2017. So, yeah, like you said, heaps of news going on in Counter-Strike right now, and, you know, let's get rolling with it. So, to start things off here, ESEA-P Finals, or the Mountain Dew League Finals here in Australia. We saw, you know, it just happened the other week. We saw Chiefs, Tainted Minds, Athletico, and Grayhound take their quarterfinal match wins and actually go ahead into the semis. Can you explain that a little bit here for us, Brainstorm?
Well, I mean, it is, as you said, those are the results. Having a look at the bracket, which I believe you're getting up there now, it was Chiefs over Funked, Tainted over Legacy, Athletico with a forfeit win over Riotous Raccoons, who had, I think it was an internet issue or something like that, but they had some issue where they couldn't field 5 players, so ATH Gold, which is X Darksided if you're not keeping up because there's many Atleticos these days, but Athletico Gold is X Darksided, so Dick Stacey and the boys got a forfeit win, that's what I wanted to say. I nearly said a free win, which is the same thing. And then Grayhound over Avant, so there was what? To run through the scores quickly, Chiefs over Funk, 16-4 on Inferno, 16-12 on Overpass 2-0. Tainted over Legacy, 11-16, oh wait, the scores are backwards. 16-11 on Train, win for Tainted. 11-16 loss on Cobble. 16-6 win on Cache. Obviously no scores for ATH versus Riotous and Grayhound. 16-3, 16-7 in Inferno and Overpass respectively over Avant Gaming, which then put us into the semi-finals, which were... Yeah, they were semi-finals. I was going to say they were the grand finals of the online bit, but they weren't. There was 2 games, but that was Chiefs versus Tainted and Grayhound versus Athletico, which is... I mean, they're matchups we've seen a lot of recently. That's basically like CGPL all over again right there.
Yeah, and good matchups at that, really. And, I mean, another point to make about all of these matches so far as well is Righteous actually, like you said, were forfeiting against Athletico. To put a little bit of context behind that, Righteous weren't able to field their 5th. I'm not quite sure who, but it happened due to internet connection issues. So, unfortunately, they did have to... Yeah, exactly. And they did have to drop that series against Athletico. But, I mean, going back to those semi-finals, Chiefs versus Tainted, ATH versus Grayhound, I mean, you know, we're talking about, you know, pretty much the top CS there at that point.
Essentially, I mean, this is basically what happened to CGPL LAN again, in terms of these matchups, except Grayhound actually managed to beat ATH Gold, which didn't happen at that point. But, running through scores again, it's Chiefs over Tainted Minds, because, I mean, Chiefs barely ever lose. In season play, you can see they only dropped 1 map, which was... I'm not actually sure who it was to. I thought it was this Tainted loss there, but do the semi-finals count as part of the season standings, though? I don't know. Either way, the 2-1 to Chiefs over Tainted Minds was a 14-16 loss for them on Nuke, 16-6 win on Cache, and 16-4 win on Cobble. So, despite a close first map, bit of a blowout afterwards, and then Grayhound versus ATH, 16-3 on Overpass, 14-16 on Mirage, and 16-8 on Nuke. Now, that leaves us with the grand finals we played out between Chiefs and Grayhound, which I believe is happening to give this video recording a date tonight.
Yeah.
So, after that, we'll have, you know, the best of 3 between Chiefs versus Grayhound, the maps of which are undecided as of right now. And then the winner of that goes to the, what is it called? The Global Challenge LAN, I think, is the,
Global Challenge.
The name for it, which is held somewhere overseas. It was in London last time. It could be anywhere this time. We'll see, but that's what they're playing for.
Yeah, and, you know, like you said, this video will pretty much be going up the night of this grand final. So if you are watching, you might be just in time to catch that series as well. So just after
it's at 8 p.m. AEST, just to put that in there.
Exactly.
So
if you get the chance to watch this video, afterwards you can also take a look at that series. But moving on a little bit to our next topic here, Moey actually departing from Grayhound. We talked about how Grayhound were in the grand finals of this tournament, and now all of a sudden we've seen a roster change here. What do you think so far, Brainstorm?
Well, I mean, Moey out from Grayhound is a change that I thought would happen, but I thought it would happen a long time ago. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with Moey, if you don't follow the AU scene as closely, Moey is their, I guess, secondary AWPer at times behind Gratisfaction. He was a rifler as well. He was whatever they needed, really. He's very, very good. But Moey has a wife and a young child and a full-time job. So
Yeah.
he didn't have the same time to commit as everyone else, I guess. And supposedly that is the factor that led to his removal. I mean, if you look at the HLTV news post there, it's got everything in it. But he released a twit longer statement, which I'm going to read a little bit of. Basically, our prac schedule of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays 8 to 11, Sundays 6 to 11, plus Thursdays closer to comps, as well as not being able to attend the Perth trip for the entire duration, made the team believe I'm holding them back, and that isn't enough. So this is direct from Moey. Now, the Perth trip, just to put clarification on that, it was for... What event was that for? Was it WCA?
Yeah, WCA on
WCA.
Singapore servers.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so that's the deal, because a lot of these like Asian leagues are played on Asian servers, so teams travel to Perth because A, it's cheaper than traveling overseas, and B, it's the best ping you can get from Australia to Asian servers, usually. So that's the deal with the Perth trip. It's not like there was an event over there that they missed, but Moey played it from Sydney because he didn't have time to get there. His whole statement is there. You can go and read through that if you want to. But then the other thing that interests me in that is he says at the bottom, because this isn't performance, I don't think there'll be any bouncing back. I don't think teams are willing to work to my schedule like Grayhound, Immunity, and James promised me they would, but we'll see. The Grayhound deal really made the time spent away from family more justifiable, and I don't know if I can go back to the standard stuff. So, I mean, that doesn't sound so great. Maybe Moey retiring, maybe Moey not. We'll have to see. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of teams in the scene that would be very happy to have him. It's just...
Yeah.
With that time schedule and with those time constraints that he has, it's a little bit difficult.
It's quite a way up in options for sure. And I mean, as for what Grayhound are doing, like to sort of counteract that at the moment, Destiny, as we know, have been with this roster. You know when they were in their time with Immunity, and of course now Grayhound. He's sort of substituting for the team at the moment. Of course, due to personal circumstances, he won't be able to travel to some of these tournaments. So in that case, they are still on the hunt for a fifth. And I mean, we were talking a little bit earlier before this episode about who would actually be a potential candidate for Grayhound, who can actually slot into that position that perhaps Moey filled, to sort of get this team back into the top echelons of Counter-Strike.
Well, I mean, we've got 4 free agents listed here now. Disclaimer: I know there's more free agents that I'm not thinking of. There just has to be. But we've got 4 of, I suppose, notable ones. And those people we have are Kyoto, hugzG, Chriso and Nikez. Right. Now, in terms of a role-to-role replacement for Moey, I guess hugzG would be a decent option because he's usually been a primary AWPer in the teams that he's been on, but he is a secondary AWP. So if they want another AWP, they could grab hugzG. But I personally think the smartest choice, or maybe not the smartest because I'm not a pro player and don't run a team, but the choice that makes the most sense to me would be grabbing Kyoto.
Yeah.
Because he's just so unbelievably sharp, of course. He's off his time on Tainted Minds, and then in the previous iteration of Avant, which is now mostly Kings, before that. So he's been around the top of the scene for a very long time, and he's actually looking quite good. So maybe a Kyoto, but also, Chriso and Nikez in there as free agents, all very good players. So yeah, it just depends on what Grayhound want to do. If they want another AWPer, or if they just want a direct upgrade in terms of skill. I mean, looking at the rest of their AWPer, they have Urcast, Gratisfaction, Burn, and Pracker. So, with the exception of Grat, obviously, not too many players that could grab an AWP, but I know Burn was AWPing a little while ago, so maybe he could become the secondary AWPer if they grab Kyoto. I don't know.
Maybe. Well, we do know for certain, Gratis being that main AWP, so, you mentioned before Kyoto, maybe, filling in that role really well. I actually agree with you in that case as well, especially, with the grind that he's been on, in previous teams like Tainted Minds and Avant and Atletico before that. Definitely, seems like the right decision here for Grayhound. But at the same time, of course, there's many things going on that I'm sure that we're not aware of, talking about personalities, work ethic, these sorts of things. And, we mentioned hugzG, Chriso, Nikez. These are all free agents which could very well do the same in filling those boots. So, that's sort
And
of...
there's definitely more for it as well.
Yeah, exactly. And, that's sort of the Grayhound boot camp at the moment as their situation. But, in terms of Moey's future, I mean, you talked a little bit about how he's sort of weighing up his options between personal commitments and, still grinding on CS. But, I mean, it would be great to see him still compete, because we're still talking about, like a great CS 1.6 legend who's been playing the game pretty much over a decade at this point. I mean, do you still see a future here for Moey?
I don't know. I can't really comment realistically on if he has a future, because I don't know, like, internally what teams are looking at grabbing, a player like Moey who's looking at doing what, because I just to put some clarification out there for people who are watching this, we don't hear as much like leaks as you'd think we would. Like, I mean, I hear about some roster changes a week or two before they happen, but it's always a whole team, like a whole team is moving somewhere, or a whole team is leaving an org or starting a new org or whatever. It's rare that you hear this is what this individual player is doing, I guess, without asking that player. So I don't have that much to go on really, but personally, it'd be a shame, I think, if Moey did stop playing. I totally understand if he did, given his situation, given he's got family and work, and that, as he said, another team might not be able to support him as well as Grayhound could have. But I think it'd be a shame if he stopped playing, and I'd like to see him continue. I just don't. I can't even really guess where that would be, because all of the top teams, the top sort of 4 or 5 teams, I think are fairly set for now.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Rosters.
Definitely in the case.
I don't think he can slot into one of Tainted or Chiefs or Kings or any of those teams. So if he does keep playing, it wouldn't be in an already top team, but I think it'd be a shame to see him go.
Yeah, absolutely. You say it there. He's sort of had that long history, and of course high performance in Counter-Strike. It would be a shame to see him go, but I actually do think he will bounce back from this. CS players never really quit CS if you think about it. We always talk about these retirements.
Nobody quits CS.
Yeah, exactly. So
it's not possible.
Only time will tell for that story for Moey. But moving on here, we also have plenty of qualifiers and tournaments of the like, to get through in this show. So let's start things off here with the Zowie Extremesland closed qualifier. Also happened just recently. We saw the open quals come in as well, which we saw Avant, Riotous, Noxide, and Kid coming through with.
We did, and the standout team there for me is Kid, just because when we were all talking internally, all the casters that I chat to regularly and looking at this, we all said, "Who's Kid? What is this? Who is this team?" And looking at the roster, it was actually players that I'd heard of. So for those who don't know, Kid is Kid himself, Soju, Lukey Boy, Dugan, and Nation. So I'd heard of a few of those guys before, but as a team, I didn't know who they were. So it's interesting that normally if you think of a closed qualifier, the teams that are going to come in are well established in the top sort of 8 teams in the region, which, by the way, I'm not going to try and... Whoops, sorry, microphone. I'm not going to try and quantify, because there was a discussion on Twitter about this recently, and I believe it was Offner who eventually just said you have Chiefs and you have everyone else. And it's way too difficult to say this team's second best, this team's third best, and so on and so forth. But the point is, you normally see these sort of top 8 established teams, and they're all in orgs as well. It is rare to, never happens these days that we see a team who's orgless making it into something big. So Kid did well, and speaking of Kid and the player Kid himself, do want to highlight him in their series against Avant, which was a 2-1. He went 63 and 48. He was the only positive player in their team, and he top fragged in the entire server. So pretty impressive. They did get knocked out, but
signs of life, I guess.
Exactly, and they made it there, which is the good thing. And then, so it was Avant, Riotous, Noxide, and Kid who made it through. Athletico, Kings, Legacy, and Tainted were invited.
That's right.
And then Athletico and Kings proceeding to the regional final, which will be a LAN with Chiefs and Grayhound.
Yeah, so you pretty much outlined it there. Athletico and Kings proceeding from the closed qualifier into those regional finals. That's actually going to be a LAN final in Sydney of ESL Studios, of course. And that will also mean, another chance for international opportunities here. So again, Kings, Athletico, and I believe, Chiefs and Grayhound.
Chiefs and Grayhound.
That's correct. And I mean, again, it's another chance for more LAN competitions between top teams. Again, something that we love to see. And not only that, but an international opportunity at the end of it. So to play in those Extremelands, or the Extremeland Asian competition all the way in Asia. I mean, last year we saw Renegades play, Mongols, those sorts of teams were, perfect experience for teams that are still, residing here in Australia.
Yeah, it's always good to have these international LAN opportunities, and just to have more LANs in general, not even looking overseas, but looking at that Sydney LAN, which, by the way,
Absolutely.
in ESL Studios is open audience. You can get tickets, so do it. Go, it'll be fun.
Yeah.
It's LAN CS is like the pinnacle for these players, and it's something that, as a I play the game, but not professionally. I never really realized how important LAN was, but I was chatting with the Chiefs guys at CGPL and like going over the notes that I made because they were curious, and they were like, "Is it still based on line results?" To which I said yes, and they were like, "Great, it's useless." So, while I don't entirely agree with that, I think online stats still has a point, which is not a conversation with a star right now. But anyway, LAN CS is like the pinnacle for all of these teams. It's what they want to do. It's where they think the actual meaningful results come through. It's like the best test of team versus team. We don't have to worry about silly Australian internet issues or, mum cooking dinner in the background or anything else. When you're on a LAN environment, it's you and your team and you're entirely focused. And it's like, it's what they all want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's only going to become more prolific in this region as time goes on. I mean, even to compare things at the start of the year, 8 months ago, we weren't seeing nearly as much competitions or, even further LAN competitions, which you've mentioned. So, it'll be great to see Atletico, Kings, Chiefs and Grayhound, fight it out. And of course, we haven't actually seen Kings on LAN, I believe, especially in like such a high level, environment. So, another point to make, I guess, about, this, tournament.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think the opening matches have been decided. Actually, no, they might have been. I have way too many tabs open and can't find it. But it'll be interesting to see those two teams going at it. Of course, it depends on the draw, but I would be very surprised if the final wasn't Chiefs versus Kings, because I mean, Greyhound will be using Destiny instead of their stand-in, and Atletico, they look good, but Kings have looked insane, and of course Chiefs, we've seen such a high standard from them for so long that I'd be surprised if the finals wasn't Kings versus Chiefs, but we'll see.
Yeah.
And speaking of the Kings, of course, they didn't drop a single map in the qualifiers.
Yeah, and that's another reason to say, or another reason to sort of back them as a horse in the sense to in this tournament, because it's there's no reason to doubt them at this moment, and I suppose on the other hand as well, there's no real reason to say that they will flop out in this tournament.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, I've personally been sort of a little bit iffy about Kings just because I didn't want to buy into the hype too hard, because they're very much a super team. If you think about it, it's like, if you look at that lineup, it's literally just they grabbed all of the best free agents they could at the time, which was, a few months back when that shuffle was still going on. There was a lot of free agents floating around. They grabbed like the best 5 players that they could and put them all in one roster. And you look at it, and on paper you think, all right, these guys are going to destroy everyone. I've been trying to be a little bit skeptical, just so I don't instantly go, wow, yeah, these guys are amazing. But from what I've seen of them recently, it looks like they're very much living up to the hype, which they should with, players like the 5 that they have. It's a ridiculous team. So I'm really excited to see them go on LAN.
Yeah.
I think they'll be good. And so far in all the online stuff they've played, they've been very dominant.
Yeah, and as you stated before, this is open to the public, so if you want to grab some tickets at ESL Australia, then you're more than welcome to, which I, highly recommend. These are going to be some great matchups. Moving on a little bit more now, something a little bit out of the blue or perhaps unexpected from the company Unikrn TV, if you are aware of it. They've actually decided to host an Australian Showdown. So Showdown being the prominent word here, they're actually invited some teams to come in and actually compete against each other for, I believe, $10,000. So Brainstorm, run us through a little bit about that.
It's 10,000 Australian, I believe, and it's 5,000 for first place, 3.5 for second, 1.5 for third place, and fourth place. Well, bad luck, my friends. So it's interesting because it's literally just out of nowhere they've announced this Australian Australian Showdown, they're calling it. It's just double elimination best of 3 over 3 days. Starts tomorrow as of the recording of this, August 16th on Wednesday, and will run through to the 18th. And it's 2 best of 3s both days. So the invited teams are Chiefs, Grayhound, Kings, and Athletico. There's a bit of weirdness about the invites, which I'm not really going to get into too much, but they just sort of grabbed 4 teams and ran with them. And I mean, the argument could be made for Tainted Minds versus Athletico versus whoever, but those are the 4 teams we have, and it's going to be a good one. But it's a double elimination bracket over 3 days, so it's the opening matches will be played tomorrow. Then Thursday will feature the first lower bracket game, which is the elimination lower bracket game, and the upper bracket final, which is, if you're not familiar with how these sorts of things work, if you win your opening match in the upper bracket final, you're straight into the grand, usually with a 1-map advantage or something, but I'm not sure of the format for this one. But anyway, lose the first one, you go into the lower bracket. If you lose that, you're eliminated. It's double elimination, so win 2, you're through, lose 2, you're out. Then on Friday, there will be the lower bracket grand final, which is the people who lost their first, won their second, and they'll play against the loser of the winners final. Yeah. That's correct. So both the teams who are 1-1 in best of 3s, and then they'll play the grand final, which will be on Friday. So it's 2 best of 3s every day for the next 3 days of this week, is the really simple way I can say it. It's $10,000 on the line. So that'll be interesting. The other thing as well, which I think will be fun, is that the casters who are... Where did I put that link? It's Banksy and hugzG.
Yeah, so they'll actually be prefacing this matchup. So, I mean, there's a lot of complexities already and enough tournaments to say, geez, what format is actually going on in each of these tournaments, and to sort of get an understanding of each of the teams and, those matchups. Hopefully Banksy and Hugs can give us a little bit of insight into that, and that's going to be on their Odds Breaker live show segment as well, hopefully tomorrow.
Yeah, and Odds Breaker is a bit of an interesting name. Like, I'm not sure if it's going to be a statistical analysis type thing, or, I mean, it's better not be a betting related thing, because that's what I think of when I think of odds. But, we'll see. That'll be fun. They're 2 casters that I've seen quite a bit of and that I do quite like. So, that'll be entertaining. But yeah, that's the next 3 days of this week. So it's essentially, you can take this entire episode and summarize it with the following sentence, right? If you want to watch Australian Counter-Strike, you're in luck, because there is lots. All of it. Many Counter-Strikes.
Yeah, there's plenty of it. And, I mean, even going, to this Unikrn TV Showdown, we haven't seen it before. And I suppose to provide a little bit of context as to who they are and where this has come from, Unikrn, of course, being a UK-based company. So this has come all the way across the sea in UK itself. And it's actually in affiliation with Faceit as well. So, some reputable names behind that brand as well.
Here's the other thing. You know how I said I wasn't sure if it'd be betting? Right. I just realized I should really Google Unikrn. Unikrn are a betting website. So that Odds Breaker segment probably will be... I mean, even if it's not about betting, it'll be betting related, because it's called Odds Breaker, and Unikrn are a betting website. But there you go. They've been running stuff as well. They do their own streams on Unikrn TV, which is where this will be. So they're involved in esports as well as, a betting website. But there you go. That's the connection there. I only just realized I should really Google who they are, but there you go.
Well, yeah, and, Faceit will be back in that tournament, probably providing maybe a little bit of, logistics, server running, that sort of thing, which you can come to expect when running a tournament. But, I mean, like you said, that's tomorrow. That's going to start things off. It runs over a couple of days, so if anyone's willing to watch that, then it's there for you to watch. So that is one of the many tournaments that are going on throughout the weeks coming in August and September. Next up, this is actually something really out of the woodworks. Gfinity announcing their league in Australia. Pretty crazy stuff here, Brainstorm. Can you give us a little bit of a rundown as to what that even means?
So they've announced their Australian Elite Series, which it all sounds great. It's set to launch early 2018, and it's going to be supposedly potentially televised and on Twitch, which is great, right? You think, cool, it's another league, it's more money, it's more potential land opportunities for all the top teams in our region. But where things get a little bit weird is that it's a joint management, a joint venture is the word I wanted, between Gfinity and HT&E. who are an event company that apparently stands for here, there, and everywhere. I've got their press release here. I assume you do as well.
Yeah, yeah. We'll have a look
Cool.
at that.
So, it's a partnership with Gfinity. It'll deliver Australian gamers a clear and structured top-to-bottom competitive framework within Australian esports. So the basic thing, they'll have the Elite Series, which is the pro level one, and the Challenger Series, which is open to all. So it's a way to work your way in, start at the bottom, and then work your way up to play with the pros, ideally. The point for me where things get weird is, I'm just going to read this for as it is.
Yeah.
And the founding franchise teams for Australia's first city-based professional esports league, commencing in summer of 2018, will be the Adelaide Photonics, Brisbane Deceptors, Melbourne Metattack, Melbourne Revolt, Perth Subnets, Sydney Blue Surge, and Sydney Obsidian. I don't know if that's meant to be Obsidian, but there it is. So that's where the weirdness comes in. It's city-based teams.
Yeah, and that's what's crazy to think about all of this, because it's, we're seeing like a franchised league in a sense. We have dedicated cities around Australia, being named to compete in this tournament, and then of course it's going to, be available for orgs maybe to buy in or that sort of thing. It's all really just up in the air at the moment, but what's interesting to make about all of it is this is something that is completely unexpected in CS. We expect this sort of thing perhaps in other games, which it's more of a closed circuit or more interaction between the developers and their leagues, such as Riot and the League of Legends. In CSGO, it's always open to anyone. Anyone can host any sort of tournament, which we've seen many here in Australia. And for Gfinity to try and do a city-based franchise league, I'm not to say that it won't work, but I'm really interested to see how that actually pans out throughout the months.
Yeah, it sounds like it's going to be an OPL sort of thing, if you're familiar with League of Legends. The Elite Series will see city-based franchise teams compete weekly at dedicated esports venues, with each event broadcast live online, and across other TV media platforms. To finish my sentence. So it sounds like it wants to be an OPL type thing where the players come in the studio every week and play. I hope on LAN, I really do, but it might be they're probably playing online, because the Sydney guys come in and Melbourne guys go to a Melbourne studio. I don't actually know if it's going to be all of the studios are run out of Sydney, or if there's one in each city that they have this done and you all go in. But it's an odd one, because we don't have anything like this at the moment. And they've got the Challenger Series, which is meant to run into it, so you can work your way up through Challenger and then get into Elite, which, I guess you could again draw parallels to OCS versus OPL, which is all franchised, because you have to buy your spot in both of those things through Riots. So this is all League of Legends for those who aren't familiar. But back to this Gfinity Counter-Strike version. An interesting sentence in here is team owners will be asked to select their squads for the upcoming seasons. So that's from a pool of top-ranked challenger players and pro players. Each squad will have a defined number of professional and amateur players and be managed within fixed salary caps. Now, I actually should point out, we've talked about Counter-Strike a lot. We don't know this is Counter-Strike. What I'm assuming it will be is Counter-Strike Rocket League and maybe Street Fighter or something. Gfinity's Challenger Series in the UK is those 3 games. I assume it won't be League of Legends or Overwatch, because the OPL and the Overwatch World League both exist. So I assume they won't be touched in this. But for me, it's like, if you have to have a city-based team, what team is going to want to give up their own branding and have to split their lineup to go in this? For a Sydney example, right? Because I'm from Sydney, and therefore this is the most relevant example for me. If we're talking Sydney Counter-Strike, if you want to put a Sydney team together, it'd have to be a mix. And you'd look at something like, I don't know, maybe Tux, Pex, Malta, King Big. Who else is from Sydney? I had another player that I said earlier, and we were talking about this, and I can't remember.
Chriso,
someone
I
else.
believe.
No, Chriso's Brisbane.
Oh, okay.
Well, I don't know. I suggest someone else. Anyway, you get 5 Sydney players who aren't currently playing together in a team.
Yeah.
And then you've got to try and actually all of the Chiefs might be Sydney. I can't remember. Anyway, the point is, you get these 5 players who either do or don't already play together, and then you have to get them to give up to hit the Chiefs example, they can't be the Chiefs esports squad for this league. They'd have to be the Sydney Blue Surge or Sydney Obsidian or any of those other team names. So I'm not sure what org is going to want to give up their branding
Yeah.
And if orgs don't want to get involved, then I'm not sure who's going to play in this thing, to be entirely honest.
Yeah, and that's not even the first, that's not even it in terms of questions about this league. Simply because, at least in the statement, it's been introduced things like a salary cap and, what do you call it? Introducing extra players, that sort of thing, drafting of players into other teams. And, in traditional sports, that's something that is expected or standard in general sports. But in terms of esports, and especially Counter-Strike, this is very foreign stuff. So, for HTNE and Gfinity, any other, organisers involved, I mean, it's hard to say. I don't know anyone behind the scenes in terms of who's running this and, how it will, sort of pan out. But, I mean, it's sort of all up in the air at the moment. We are talking about the early stages here. So really, what we can guarantee, or what we know from the statement, is there will be a Challenger Series open to all players in late 2017.
Early 2018.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an early 2018 sort of deal.
Yeah, so the Open Cup will be available at the end of this year, and then they'll have sort of that franchise closed circuit sort of thing in early 2018. So, sort of, back to back in a sense, which is probably why they've announced it midway through this year. So that's sort of Gfinity, all in a nutshell there. I wanted to also ask you, Brainstorm, because, we've talked about, 2 or 3 tournaments so far in Australia, and now another one's been introduced. So really, could this be potential oversaturation for our competitors in Australia, seeming as well that they don't even live to play CS?
Well, that could be the thing. This could be the change that allows players to go full-time if they do have salary caps, but I'm not sure players will want to go full-time in only this league. But, I mean, we do have a lot of tournaments running, but the difference with all of them is they're all online, and essentially, provided you're not playing 50-round overtimes every game, you can usually hop from one to the other with, decent regularity. I mean, on a caster's side of thing, of course, I've seen it where teams will be, a little bit late for their game in CGPL because they're playing ESEA or whatever. But the point is, it's all online stuff. So you can just sit there and hop from one to the other, and you get to schedule your games. So, and you know about this, of course, being a team manager.
Yeah.
You can try and get everything going without conflicts. The fact that this new Gfinity League is going to be, as it appears, a fixed time every week where you have to be in a studio or something, that's like, all right, that day is now unavailable for online CS. And the other thing we don't know is if this thing will be exclusive, because it's a franchise league, but I don't know if it'll have player exclusivity or not. So I don't think it's too much. Of course, it's more money and it's more games for our top players to be playing in, Counter-Strike, Rocket League, Street Fighter, whatever form this game or this thing takes, whatever games it goes for. But if it has exclusivity, I don't think too many people are going to go for it. So there's only so much conjecture we can provide, but
yeah,
I don't think it's too much. I don't think it's oversaturation, but I think it's pushing towards that point.
Yeah, you can only spread, your time so thin here, in Australia. So, I mean, that's just all up in the air at the moment in terms of Gfinity. So only time will tell for that moment. But moving on to another tournament, perhaps one that is a little bit not...
So many tournaments.
So many tournaments, exactly. And something that we haven't seen very much of, just sort of coming out of the woodwork. It's been almost a year since we've last heard from them. The IeSF 2017 closed qualifier. So this is, again, another international opportunity like Zowie, like ESEA, which will also see, some teams compete together, and the final winner being that grand final, proceeding to Busan, South Korea. So that's the international opportunity there, and we're going to see that between Chiefs and Kings. Brainstorm, what do we think?
Oh, Chiefs and Kings is going to be a banger. That'll be a heck of a fun game because, we've already talked so far in this episode about how Chiefs have been consistently good forever, and Kings are coming out of, not nowhere, but they're a new lineup. This 5 hasn't played together before, I don't think, and they're firing on all cylinders and just demolishing everyone. So that'll be a really, really fun game to watch that I think actually could be fairly even. Yeah. And then heading over to South Korea, I think I think that final, the Chiefs versus Kings one, we don't know when it's going to be played, but I think it's in like a month or so.
Yeah,
I'm not
September,
sure.
I believe.
Yeah, I think it's something like that, but I don't know. I looked on the IESF Twitter earlier, or the AEL Twitter, which is the AU Esports League, who are the local branch of IESF. They say details to come, so details to come. Watch that space, this space, any space. There'll be details somewhere. But that'll be the Chiefs versus Kings game, and the winner goes over to South Korea, along with everyone else. I believe the last time ISF was on it was in China, wasn't it?
Indonesia was the finals last year in
Indonesia.
2016. So yeah.
That's right. Can you remember who went over for that?
It was sort of it was the Atletico lineup.
I was going to say, yeah, I was going to say,
like
I
Infrequent,
was
Sonic,
thinking,
that sort of thing.
yeah, I want to say an Atletico mix,
Yeah, pretty much.
the
And,
Australian to go.
yeah, so we haven't really heard from them since 2016, but from hearing within the scene, things have been running quite smoothly in terms of matches and adminning and that sort of thing, which is a contrast to what we've seen in 2016. So that's really great to hear from the IESF or the AEL boot camp, or camp rather, and
Camp.
and so that's some good stuff from then. So only time will tell as to how that comes about, how that comes to fruition, but it will be a grand final between Chiefs and Kings. Yet another reason or another place to go in terms of watching Australian Counter-Strike in these coming months.
Definitely watch that one if you can. That's going to be, I think that's the next scheduled game of Chiefs versus Kings. Well, it's the next one that we know of, because Chiefs and Kings will both be at Extremesland, and they will both be at the Australia Showdown. But the next game that we have confirmed of Chiefs versus Kings, not just Chiefs versus Kings potentially, because they're at the same event, is ISF. But just on that point, actually, I should make it, we could potentially have Chiefs and Kings playing together 3 times the next little while. Once for the Extremesland, once for this Unikrn TV thing, the Australian Showdown, and now for ICF as well. So I'm just going to say watch Chiefs versus Kings games, because my gut feeling is they're going to be explosively awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then one of Chiefs or Kings heading overseas. I just had a thought. I assume this tournament doesn't have a backban rule, or else Chiefs wouldn't have made it this far. So
yeah,
therefore probably can head over to South Korea.
No, I
Or
believe
Kings,
so.
which-
And again, I mean, it's just another great clash of the titans, I guess you could say, for this tournament. And it's not even the only one. We're not done yet with tournaments here, Brainstorm. We've got
one more.
ESL, AU&NZ 2017 Season 2 Finals. You could call it Season 4 as well, because they did have a couple seasons back in 2016. But, to run through this a little bit more, $10,000 LAN, again, another LAN which is fantastic to hear. Kings, Legacy, Anonymous, which we know to be the old Atletico lineup, and Avant. Let's hear about it, Brainstorm.
So the reason you say Season 2 versus Season 4 is, I'm pretty sure AU&NZ's branding is Season 1 year, Season 2 year.
Right.
So this is the 4th season of AU&NZ, but it's Season 2 of 2017. So there you go, there's that. But $10,000 LAN finals between Kings, Legacy, Anonymous, which is Sniper's Atletico. I'm not quite sure who their 5 is going to be, but I assume it'll be Sniper, Nikes, Iron, those sorts of people. Actually, Iron's been playing with Legacy. That's going to be interesting. I'm not sure how the roster lock situation works. For AU&NZ, we'll have to figure that out. And then, of course, current Avant. So Kings are coming in as first seed. I think they lost 1 or 2 maps the entire season.
Yeah.
I feel like they went like 12-2 or something like that in the in regular play, because it's 7-week season, 2 games a week, so 14 games total.
Yeah.
So Kings come in as first seed. Sorry, continue.
They had an overall strong performance, Kings. So again, another reason to sort of back them.
They did, and now it is worth pointing out that unlike the previous AU&NZ finals that we've had, this one is, because you have to remember that AU&NZ as a whole, the Australian New Zealand champs, is not just Counter-Strike, it's also Rocket League and it's also Overwatch. So last time we had the Rocket League portion, it was running at IEM, and then Overwatch had a separate LAN to CS. I'm not sure what's going on with Overwatch or the scene, but this time Rocket League is going to be on the Saturday, which is this Saturday, and then Counter-Strike will be on Sunday. So as a result of that, the Counter-Strike portion is going to be single elimination best of 3 rather than double over 2 days, which is what the previous AU&NZ was. So it's the 2 opening games, then the winners play each other, and the winner of that wins the whole thing. So single elim best of 3, and then the Rocket League on Saturday, of course. So that's this weekend. Single elim best of 3 should still be fairly fair. I think it's not like it's all best of 1 sort of deal. So best of 3 should still let the better teams come through. But
well, that's right, and simply because of it's come off the back of a league, so you would expect over like the 7 to 8 weeks of competition to sort of draw out some of the outliers in each matchup and sort of bring those seedings correctly. So 1 to 4, hopefully that single elim best of 3 will sort of bring the best teams out of it. But really, I mean, it's another great event to attend, especially if you like both Rocket League and CS, because it all is happening within the one weekend, again, at the ESL studios in Sydney.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a look on Liquipedia quickly, because I do want to know. Apparently, according to Liquipedia, Legacy will be Deoxide, Dizzy, Matt City, IeSF, and Chriso, which makes sense. It's a roster they had all season. And then Sniper's ex Athletico will be Sniper, Nikes, Iron, Dexter, and Destiny. So
okay,
that's what Liquipedia thinks the rosters are going to be, but we'll see. And then the opening games are Kings versus Legacy and Avant versus Anonymous. And then my prediction would be
let's hear it.
Kings versus Avant final, and then Kings win the whole thing. Because against Avant, I'm pretty sure they've won every single game they've played against them. I think it's only been 3. It was like 2 16-13s both on Inferno, and then a 16-5 on Mirage. So I'd give it to Kings overall, but I mean it depends on what those rosters are, because I'm not sure. There's been quite a few shuffles within Legacy and the ex Athletico roster and all this sort of stuff. So depends on lineup, but I'd still see Kings coming out of the whole thing. But if you want to see those teams play on LAN, as Deadline has said, you can come along this weekend. There's tickets available. There's the Rocket League on Saturday, which will be fun. You can see. Actually, no, I was going to say which teams you can see, but I'm not sure who's in it, so I'm not going to make a big call for the Rocket League thing because I don't follow it closely enough. But you can come and watch the Counter-Strike. You can watch Kings, Legacy, Anonymous, and Avant play on LAN. That'll be a good time, and that is this Sunday, starting from 10 or 11 a.m., I think. So that'll be fun. Come along if you're in Sydney, and then also, there's other things you can do. You can go to Extremesland LAN. You can go to all this other stuff.
Plenty of competitions.
That's okay.
To attend with the coming
and
month. But you said it yourself. I mean, you gave a little bit of a prediction as to what we can expect from each of these teams. I'm going to back with you as well. I think Kings here going to have quite a lot of domination in this LAN, but that's a question to be answered at another time. As for this show, though, that is the conclusion of Season 2, Episode 1, Crossfire. It has been quite some time, but it's also been a pleasure. Yeah, just a little, but it's been a pleasure talking about these news with you, Brainstorm. So I want to thank you for coming back with me onto this show. But this podcast will also be available in an audio-only format. So for those SoundCloud listeners, that will be available for you. But in terms of this show, I mean, we're done, and I want to thank you guys for watching, and tune in next week for episode 2.